If you are planning to showcase R and Python programming as your skill set on resume for coming job interviews, there are fair chances you will get question from the interviewer as what type of language is R and Python. Okay, so short answer is R and Python are the interpreted languages. What is the meaning of the interpreted language? What type of languages are there for the computers? So we will try to understand each and everything. Based on this, we will try to understand interpreted language. Then we will see the advantages and disadvantages of the interpreted language. So you are better prepared for your interview. So let's get started. So first is we need to understand how the codes are executed in the computer. So we'll start from the bottom. So central processing unit is the actual computer which computes the codes for us, which where the codes are executed. It understands only binary, so in the form of 0 and 1. So the binary file is the file which is used to execute in the CPU. And if you have ever seen the .bin file, these are the compiled binary or the compressed binary files which are going to execute in your CPU. Okay, so what type of language is this? What type of language is the 0-1's language? It is the machine level language. So machine level language is directly executed in the CPU because machine level language is in the 0 and 1 form, and computer understands or CPU understands the 0 and 1s. Then comes the normal languages. Normal languages as in the high level languages. High level languages like the C and C++ takes the advantage of the compiler. Compiler's job is to convert the code in the C and C++ in your code, convert the code in the machine level language. Okay, so you will write your code in the C++, then you will compile it. Once the code is compiled, it will create a binary file to execute it in the CPU. So you don't need to compile the code again and again. C and C++ are middle level languages or high level languages. It can be categorized in the both. So what are the middle level languages and the high level languages? We will study about this in the next slide. So here, this is the language hierarchy. So first of all, it starts with the low level language. CPU, central processing unit, where machine level language is used. Okay, it can only understand the machine level language. And then there is also assembly level language. Assembly level language is used for your drivers, hardwares, right? So whatever hardwares we are using, you remember, like we need to update the driver. So those driver files are in the assembly language, which is again directly executed in the CPU. Now these are considered as the low level language, meaning machine level language. Then comes the middle level languages. Middle level languages are the compiled languages, meaning middle level language, you will form your code, you'll write your code. That code will be compiled in the binary file and then it will be executed in the CPU with the help of machine language. So C and C++ are compiled languages or middle level languages, but the C and C++, or the languages like the C++, can also be categorized as the high level language or the human level languages. So what are the human level languages? If I say print is equal to print hello. So are you able to understand the meaning of print? Yes, we know print means it is going to generate some kind of output. So whenever you are able to understand the code, we consider that language, that programming language, as the high level language or the human language, because it is a human language. Okay. So in C++ specifically, we use printf, scanf, and C in, C out for the C. So these are the printf, scanf specifically are human readable languages. That's why C++ can also be categorized as the high level language. It is not limited to middle level language, but the fair categorization is the middle level language. Now our concern is the high level language. High level language are generally interpreted language, and R and Python are high level languages and the interpreted languages. Now, what is the meaning of interpreted language? This is the most important. This is our discussion, right? So, interpreted language uses the interpreter to execute the or to perform some operations, not execute the code, to perform the operation. So, whenever you are writing any code in R and Python, that code will be sent to the interpreter. That interpreter will interpret the code. Interpreter has a virtual machine, it uses a virtual machine, and the code will be processed through that virtual machine. So your code will never reach directly to the CPU. Okay, so that's the thing with the interpreted language. So interpreter will have its own environment. In that environment, your code will be processed and the task will be performed. Okay, so this is the one important point you need to remember, that in R and Python programming, with the programming language which uses the interpreter or the interpreted languages do not use direct CPU. It uses the environment, and that environment uses the CPU. Okay, now because there is so much to do here, interpreter, your language, your code, then your interpreter, then after interpreter it will go to the machine and the CPU, so the code becomes slower. So of course there are advantages and disadvantages for R and Python as an interpreted languages. So let's see what are the advantages and the disadvantages. So first is the advantage. So now R and Python both are the interpreted languages. Python can be a binary or the machine level language if you decide to do so. But for our purpose, for the finance purpose, where we are going to perform some data analysis, data science, quantitative finance, and statistics, for all those purposes, Python will be limited to uh, interpreted language. R is strictly interpreted language. R is for data science itself. Okay. So advantages of the R and Python: it is easy to code. You can understand the code. Even if you read the code, you will be able to understand what is the meaning. If you have a fair understanding of the coding, you'll be able to understand it. Then there is a shallow learning curve. So if you start your coding course, okay, you start learning your R or Python programming, within next 30 minutes you can start working on the code. You can actually execute and perform operations. So it has a shallow learning curve. And then it is a platform independent. Platform independent means, remember one thing, whenever you generate a binary code for the middle level language or the machine level language code, the binary code, when when it is compiled on one particular platform, you cannot directly carry that code or carry that binary file and place it on, say you worked on the Windows and you take it to the, say, Mac. It will not work. Okay, so these are not the platform independent. The binary files are not platform independent. These are heavily platform dependent. But when we talk about the interpreted languages, interpreted languages are the platform independent languages. So whatever, say you have the code file, you worked on a Windows, you ran a code, you created an algorithm. Now if you copy that code directly to, say, Mac, or use directly that file to the Mac, it will get executed. It will perform properly. Okay, so that's the advantage for the your interpreted languages. Next is the disadvantages. Disadvantages are slower processing, because there is an interpreter, and interpreter is not going to execute your code directly into the system. It will become slower. Okay, then it is susceptible to code injection. Code injection as in, because interpreter is going to perform the operations, malicious codes can be injected in that interpreter, and you will never know. You will think like your software is performing like a normal software or application, or the code is performing like it should be, but in the background it might be creating or trying to attack your system or that code. Okay, so that's the problem. Code injection is also possible for the compiled languages. It is not very unique to the interpreted languages, but it is difficult for the compiled languages because there is a compiler, right? So code can be injected in the compiler, code can be injected in the interpreted languages interpreter, but it is easy to inject the code in the malicious code in the interpreter than the compiler. Next is the last disadvantage is that after your work is done, once you are done with your coding, and you created your application in data science, we are not going to create any application, but those who are the application developer and uses the R and Python, both can be used for the application development. Using R, you can use the Shiny to develop the web applications, and Python is the complete package. Okay, you can do anything in the Python, absolutely. So when you are developing the application, so that application code can be reverse engineered to see what was your raw code, meaning your raw code is susceptible to leakage. So that's the advantages and disadvantages. This is the disadvantage and the advantages of your interpreted languages. So just remember the key points, and that's all about the R as an interpreted language, R and Python as an interpreted language. So we will be coming up with the lot more videos like this, where we will cover the R and Python. We will also show you some techniques to data handling and statistics and distributions and all in the R and Python programming on this YouTube channel. So thank you for listening. See you in the next video.